Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In the early hours of a Wednesday morning, the serene tranquility of Maplewood, a quaint suburban town, was shattered when an unthinkable crime occurred. Residents of Oak Valley Lane, a stretch of homes lined with manicured lawns and white picket fences, were jolted awake by the wailing sirens of police cars and the flashing lights that pierced the dark. At the heart of this unsettling scene was the charming two-story house that belonged to the Harpers, a family known for their warm smiles and community involvement. It was the kind of place where children played in the afternoons and neighbors often gathered for barbecue parties in the backyard. But now, the cheerful facade was marred by the ominous presence of law enforcement officers cordoning off the property with yellow tape, an unsightly barrier that whispered secrets no one dared to voice aloud. A single officer, crouched low by the front porch, surveyed the area with a keen, trained eye. It wasn't long before he stood and exchanged a somber glance with his partner, who was diligently scribbling notes in a weathered note. It was clear that they were not dealing with a simple domestic disturbance. The air was thick with the weight of something darker. A neighbor, drawn by the commotion, stood at a distance, gripping a steaming cup of coffee. Her brow furrowed as she watched the scene unfold, her mind racing through the possibilities of what could have happened. In a town where trust was woven into the fabric of daily life, the reality of danger felt like a betrayal, a cruel narrative that had begun to draft the first chapter. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the gathering crowd, the serene life of Maplewood had irrevocably changed, plunging it into the depths of uncertainty and fear. The investigation was now set in motion, a quest for answers that would unearth secrets buried deep within the seemingly idyllic community. The victim. Beneath the gathering clouds, the victim's name echoed through the halls of Oak Valley. Natalie Harper, a vibrant 34-year-old, widely regarded as the heart of her community. Natalie was more than a mother and wife. She was a friend, a confidante, and a relentless volunteer who had made it her mission to uplift those around. As people began to share their memories of her, a vivid portrait of an extraordinary woman unfolded. Natalie had a smile that could light up the dimmest room, and her laughter drew people in like moths to a flame. Every Saturday, she could be found at the local farmer's market, chatting with vendors and picking up the ripest tomatoes for the family's dinner, or leading a yoga class for mothers at the town's community center. Her children, Jack and Lily, adored her, often seen perched on her hips, beaming with pride each time she made the local newspaper for her charitable efforts. When news of Natalie's death spread through Maplewood, shockwaves rippled across the town, sending ripples of disbelief through friends and neighbors. Many were quick to gather at the Harpers' home, offering condolences wrapped in hugs and tears. Families came together, united not just in grief, but in the haunting question of how someone so beloved could come to harm. The morning light revealed the police's devastating confirmation. Natalie had been found in her home, lifeless and amid signs of a struggle. In the harsh glare of reality, the idyllic town transformed into a labyrinth of whispered speculations and anxious glances. As her loved ones pieced together not just the loss of a mother and wife, but the fabric of their daily lives unraveled, they were left yearning for answers. Who could do this? And for what reason? The delicate threads of Natalie's life were now interwoven with trauma, and the search for justice had only just begun. The crime scene. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the remnants of the night's terror, Detectives arrived at the Harper residence in a slow procession. Crime scene tape fluttered like a flag in the stillness, while officers stood guard over the entrance, each detail meticulously monitored, as they attempted to preserve every fragment of evidence surrounding the tragedy. Detective Sarah Elwood, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for her unyielding resolve, crouched on the threshold before entering. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. Inside, the air felt thick with tension, each breath a reminder of the life that had been abruptly extinguished. The living room, once a gathering space filled with warmth, was now shrouded in shadows, punctuated only by the glow of floodlights. Natalie's body was discovered near the ornate coffee table, strewn with magazines and scattered toys, the marker of a busy life suddenly interrupted. Her familiar blue cardigan was bunched awkwardly against her torso, smeared with traces of crimson that painted a jarring tableau against the soft fabric. Detective Elwood surveyed the scene with a practiced eye, noting the overturned furniture, which suggested a violent struggle. Beside the couch, a family portrait was tossed aside, cracked but still framed a haunting reminder that laughter once filled this space. As the forensic team moved with quiet determination, collecting evidence, Elwood's thoughts spiraled into the unknown. Each item collected might hold the key to unearthing the truth. A broken vasite shards, glistening like glittering stars in the morning light, lay scattered on the hardwood floor, the memory of a fierce confrontation now frozen in time. A faint scent of linen fabric softener mingled with the metallic tang in the air. Something mundane, now a stark reminder of a life once lived. Outside, neighbors clustered at a distance, their hushed conversations spilling over with shock and confusion. As the scene unfolded before her, Detective Elwood understood that the implications of this crime extended beyond the walls of the Harper home. Every fractured relationship and undisclosed secret would soon be dragged into the daylight. The crime scene was not merely a collection of objects. It was a fractured puzzle begging to be solved, and each small piece would lead her one step closer to understanding the man who had taken Natalie from them. The early investigation, with the crime scene meticulously documented and evidence painstakingly collected, the early hours of the investigation began to unfold. Detective Elwood returned to the precinct, where the atmosphere was electric with urgency. Files and cases lined the walls, each bearing the weight of lives touched by crime. But this one felt different. This was personal, a haunting reminder that danger lurked in the most familiar places. Elwood gathered her team around a cluttered table for a briefing. Photographs of the crime scene were pinned on one side, while Natalie's vibrant smile stared back from family snapshots. In that moment, the team shared an unspoken determination. They wouldn't rest until justice was served. Elwood. Officer Danvers began, his voice steady but laced with agitation. We've spoken to the neighbors. Most didn't hear anything out of the ordinary, but we did catch a few inconsistencies. He slid a notepad across the table, notes scribbled hastily, revealing testimonies from nearby residents. One neighbor, a woman named Claire, had reported seeing a dark figure near the Harper home out of place in the suburb's sleepy early hours. Claire appeared shaken when recounting her observations. I could have sworn it was just after 2, she had said, her voice trembling. But when I looked outside, I didn't see anyone. Those few words weighed heavily on Elwood's mind. What about the family? She asked, redirecting the focus. Anyone with a history or recent conflicts? Danvers nodded, the papers shuffling as he pulled out Natalie's background information. There's a record of an escalating disagreement between Natalie and her ex-husband over custody arrangements. It culminated just weeks prior. He lives in a neighboring town and has been out of touch since. As the team immersed themselves in the details of Natalie's life, each revelation chipped away at the walls of their understanding. They learned that Natalie had recently started a new job, something that could have upset the delicate balance of her previous relationships. We may need to contact him for questioning, Elwood decided. The clock ticked ominously in the sparse room, time gnawing at the edges of everyone's resolve. With every lead explored, the atmosphere thickened, as if the very walls of Maplewood were holding their breath in anticipation, waiting for the truth to emerge and expose the darkness hidden beneath its tranquil facade. The dead ends. Days melted into one another as the investigation took unexpected twists. Yet the answers they sought eluded them. Detective Elwood and her team pursued leads with relentless determination. However, the threads they tugged at often unraveled into dead ends, leaving frustration hanging heavy in the air. The lurking shadow of Natalie's ex-husband, Mark, filled the room during each strategy meeting. Just as they thought they had made progress, the answers turned into fog, each lead more evasive than the last. Mark, seemingly cooperative, provided an alibi backed by friends who confirmed he had been out of town on business. Despite their skepticism, the investigators had no substantial evidence to challenge him. He'd become the potential perpetrator wrapped in a layer of plausible deniability. As the team dug deeper into Natalie's current life, connections to her workplace began to surface. Several coworkers described Natalie as a hardworking and charismatic individual. Yet none reported any signs of strife. When Elwood arranged interviews, each one unraveled into a tapestry of commendation, leaving only an uncomfortable silence hanging in the air. There seemed to be no enemies, no reasons for hate. However, one colleague's anecdote caught Elwood's attention. Rebecca had mentioned a recent altercation between Natalie and a fellow volunteer at the community center, someone who had feelings for the same charitable cause and felt overshadowed by Natalie's popularity. The name echoed faintly, but after tracking down the woman, her alibi was equally solid. She had been at her part-time job across town the night of the murder. Again, the effort to chase a lead faded into nothingness. With every day that passed, the pressure mounted. Detectives, once buoyed by adrenaline, began to feel the weight of growing fatigue. The investigation began to branch out into the lives of family and friends, collecting more fragments of a life lost. But with every person they interviewed, the story became more convoluted. Faced with tales of compassion and admiration, further tales of compassion and admiration, further distancing them from truth. As the walls of Maplewood closed in, Detective Elwood couldn't shake the feeling they were digging through good intentions. But the malice of the crime remained frustratingly out of reach. The truth lay somewhere beneath the surface, like a dangerous undercurrent in clear water, threatening to drown them in confusion if they couldn't find a way to navigate through the ambiguity. A break in the case. With exhaustion etched on their faces, the detectives gathered once more around the table, papers strewn across it like fallen leaves. Tensions ran high as frustration settled into a habitual silence until a phone call shattered the stillness. "Detective Elwood," came the voice from the precinct's front desk, urgency lacing every syllable. "You need to get back here. We have a break in the Harper case." Elwood felt a jolt of adrenaline surge through her veins as she hurried back to the station. Her heart raced, each beat echoing the hope that perhaps, finally, they were on the right track. When she arrived, a technician was sorting through recently retrieved security footage from a nearby gas station, just a few blocks from the Harper home. The flickering screen showcased a grainy view of the entrance and the gas pumps, bathed in neon light. Elwood leaned in closer as the technician rewound the tape. "We found this footage from just after 2 a.m. on the night of the murder." As they focused on a figure moving into frame, her breath hitched. A silhouette emerged, recognizably a dark hoodie pulled tight over the face obscured what might have been familiar features. The figure loitered near the pumps for a moment, glancing around before striding purposefully toward the exit, away from the camera. Heart pounding with urgency, Elwood demanded the playback be paused. "Can we enhance that? Zoom in?" she asked, her excitement barely contained. The technician nodded, fingers racing over the controls. Moments later, the quality improved enough for them to catch a glimpse of the dark sleeve, brushing against a distinctive golden emblem. "A logo from the community center," Elwood murmured, the puzzle piecing together in her mind. The figure walked with a distinct gait that seemed oddly familiar, and the more she watched, the more it echoed someone she had interviewed. "Rebecca." "Elwood, you thinking what I'm thinking?" Officer Danvers spoke, his voice grave but measured. "Let's find out why someone would linger around here at that hour," she replied, her voice steady with resolve. The significance of the discovery ignited a renewed vigor among the team. This was the lead they had been waiting for, an opportunity to bridge the chasm that had swallowed their hopes. As the detectives sprang back into action, they knew each moment counted. The unseen figure that had wandered too close to a heinous crime was about to come under scrutiny this time, armed with the truth unfolding beneath the cloak of darkness. The suspect. The air crackled with tension as Detective Elwood and her team prepared to confront Rebecca, the volunteer whose faint connection to the gas station surveillance threatened to peel back layers of the case. She was approachable and friendly, painted fondly in the memories of many who had come to know her through the community center. However, with the evidence now compelling them forward, Elwood knew they had to peel back the facade. As they arrived at the community center, its cheerful exterior clashed with the turmoil brewing beneath. Rebecca was at her usual post, arranging crafts for an upcoming children's event, humming to herself amid colorful papers and glitter. When she glanced up and saw the detectives, her expression shifted. The brightness dimmed ever so slightly. "Detective Elwood, is everything okay?" she asked, her eyes wide with a feigned innocence that didn't escape Elwood's notice. "We need to ask you a few more questions, Rebecca," Elwood began, watching for any flicker of recognition on the woman's face. Rebecca quickly put down the materials, her voice steady but laced with apprehension. "Sure, of course. What do you need?" Elwood took a breath, recalling the footage. "We have video of someone from the gas station the night of Natalie Harper's murder. The jacket." "Yes, I heard about her," Rebecca interjected, her eyes darting toward the floor. "It's such a tragedy. Remarkable how many people were affected by her." Elwood continued, keenly observing Rebecca's reaction. "You happened to be in the area that night, didn't you?" Rebecca's smile faltered momentarily, replaced by a mask of confusion. "In the area, I was at home all night, I swear." Elwood leaned closer, keeping her tone measured. "Home or not, your presence at that gas station suggests otherwise. We are concerned about the nature of your relationship with her." The atmosphere shifted, Rebecca's composure crumbling as Elwood pressed on, revealing a slip of information about an argument that had surfaced between them. Testimonials had hinted at jealousy. Rebecca had recently clashed with Natalie over the center's dynamic, feeling overshadowed and frustrated amidst Natalie's popularity. This was not personal, Rebecca sputtered, but Elwood could see the wheels turning. The walls were closing in, and with it came the realization that her version of events might soon unravel. Rebecca, we believe you may have seen something that night. Even if you weren't directly involved, Elwood said, her voice steady. We need to piece this together, but we cannot do it without your cooperation. The tension hung like a shroud around the femth camaraderie of the past, melding with suspicion. As she looked into Rebecca's eyes, the facade of shock morphed into something darker, edged with fear. They were drawing closer to the truth, but the suspect was struggling to maintain her grasp as secrets threatened to slip through her fingers. The trial, the courtroom buzzed with anticipatory energy, the kind that only comes when the stakes are high and the truth is poised to be unveiled. The air felt thick under the glare of fluorescent lights, bright enough to cast shadows on the faces of those gathered, a jury of 12 family members and the community of Maplewood, taking a collective breath in the wake of tragedy. Detective Elwood sat among the observers, her heart heavy with the gravity of what had brought them all to this moment. Rebecca Collins, once admired, now stood accused of taking Natalie Harper's life, a calculated act ignited by jealousy and resentment. The U.S. attorney's arguments echoed through the courtroom, painting Rebecca as a misunderstood victim of circumstance, a woman overwhelmed by the pressures of daily life. But the prosecution was primed, their narrative meticulously stitched together from the evidence amassed over the weeks. They recounted the path to this trial, each thread weaving a tapestry of betrayal. Elwood watched as the prosecutor detailed the timeline of events. Rebecca's presence in the vicinity of the Harper home, the damning video of her lingering near the gas station, and the toxic rivalry that had slowly escalated into something far more sinister. Miss Collins' jealousy blinded her. The prosecutor's voice rang out, driven by resentment toward a woman who embodied everything she wished to be. She made a decision that shattered a family and robbed 2 children of their mother. It wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a calculated act stemming from her desperate desire for recognition. The courtroom shifted uneasily, eyes darting toward Rebecca, whose resolve seemed to diminish with each word spoken against her. As the witnesses came forth, friends, family members, and co-workers, the mingling tales of Natalie's kindness and the undercurrents of jealousy from Rebecca painted an increasingly complex portrait of the dynamics at play. Detective Elwood felt a mixture of dread and hope. Would the jury connect these threads as she had? Would they see the burden of a life snuffed out and the darkness that often accompanied envy? As the day wore on, the jury was tasked with deliberation. Each member weighed down with the responsibility of the verdict. Would justice ultimately prevail? Outside the confines of the courtroom, Maplewood sat poised on the precipice of change, its tight-knit community unsure of what tomorrow would hold. Finally, the heavy door swung open, and the jury filed back into the room. Silence flooded the space as the foreman stood, a piece of paper clutched tightly in white-knuckled hands. Elwood's pulse quickened. She could literally feel the weight of anticipation pressing against her. On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant time stretched. a waltz of breathless moments suspended in uncertainty. As the verdict slipped through the foreman's lips, Elwood found herself grappling with the profound implications of justice served or justice, still a distant dream. The aftermath. The verdict sent shockwaves through the courtroom, and even as the gavel fell, a thick silence enveloped the room. Rebecca Collins, guilty of first-degree murder, slowly crumpled into her chair, the gravity of the sentence sinking into her like a stone. She had been a figure of sympathy mere months ago, but now she wore the weight of a killer's conviction. Her own emotions visibly unraveling as the reality of her situation became undeniable. Outside the courthouse, the air was electric, charged with the raw emotions of a community still reeling from the loss. News reporters crowded around, eager to capture the reactions of grieving family and friends. Elwood stepped out, her mind still assembling the fragments of the trial as she faced the throng of journalists clamoring for details of the case that had gripped Maplewood. Questions surged from every direction, but her thoughts remained tethered to Natalie Harper. Despite the closure the verdict offered, the ache of loss lingered in the air like a fog. The pain inflicted upon the two children, Jack and Lily, echoed like a thunderclap in her chest. It was not merely Rebecca who was guilt. Systems of emotion, envy, and human frailty had converged at a single tragic point, claiming an innocent life. In the following weeks, the vibrant community center where Rebecca had once thrived fell silent, her absence echoing in the empty halls. The rite of volunteering that had refreshed Maplewood was overshadowed by a melancholy that gripped neighbors tightly, a sense of betrayal in a safe space stained with the horror of violence. Elwood met with Natalie's family, who had dedicated themselves to advocating for stricter regulations around domestic disputes and community safety, determined that no family should endure such heartache again. Among them was Natalie's husband, who continued to navigate the choppy waters of single parenthood with resilience that inspired Elwood to reassess her own role in the community. One evening, as fireflies flickered in the dusk, she watched the children play, their laughter suspended in the warm evening air. For the first time since the trial, she felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility, a drive to foster healing in the community of promise, to preserve not just Natalie's memory, but to cultivate an environment free from the shadows of jealousy and hate. Though justice was served, the aftermath of Natalie's murder would not be defined solely by the conviction of the guilty. It would be shaped by those still standing in the wake of tragedy, by those who took the painful lessons of loss and transformed them into a call for compassion and vigilance, ensuring that the memory of Natalie Harper would forever inspire a brighter future for Maplewood. In the quiet of her office, Detective Elwood sat alone, the weight of the past few months pressing heavily upon her shoulders. Case files were stacked neatly along the desk, yet the images that danced in her mind weren't the ones from the trial. They were of Natalie Harper laughing at the community picnic, hands clasped with her children, beaming as she helped with the bait sale. The trial had marked an end, but what remained was the kaleidoscope of life that continued rotating outside the confines of the courthouse. The intricate web of relationships within Maplewood, now frayed and battered, held lessons that pointed to the fragility of trust. Deadly envy had shattered not just one life, but echoed through a dozen more, and the ripples would be felt across families and friendships for generations to come. Elwood often caught herself reflecting on the choices people made, choices steeped in emotions that were too raw to confront. How someone's disdain could morph into an irreversible impulse, leaving behind a trail of destruction. In the sanctuary she'd carved out as a detective, she understood that her role was not just to apprehend criminals, but to engage with the community, listen, and build trust amid the wreckage. Leaving the precinct one evening, she paused to survey the street bathed in orange twilight. The world beyond felt different now, vibrant yet tinged with sadness. Her purpose became clear: to reach out to help those who'd lost their way amid the strife, ensuring that no voice in the community would be left unheard. In a way, the scars of this case would forever mold her approach to a profession that demanded empathy alongside justice, a constant reminder that every case told a story, but it was the people that made each narrative resonate deeper than any verdict could define. As she looked toward the horizon, she vowed that she would strive to illuminate the shadows, sparking conversations rather than allowing silence to fester. This commitment, rooted in humanity, would honor Natalie Harper's legacy, serving as a guiding beacon for all those who walked the intricate paths of their lives.